Memorial Day, the official start of the summer season, a time for friends and family and enjoying the long weekend. Originally known as Decorations Day, Memorial Day has been celebrated since the end of the Civil War as a day we honor those who lost their lives while defending our freedom. As a WRCX Community Spotlight special presentation, we would like to introduce you to some of Miami Valley's heroes and find out what Memorial Day means to them. Let's start in Dayton at the corner of 3rd Street and Gettysburg Avenue at the Dayton National Cemetery.
Hi, my name is Doug Ledbetter. I'm the director of the Dayton National Cemetery. I've been at the cemetery as the director for approximately 9 years. Spent my entire career after the military with the National Cemetery Administration, most of which has been here at Dayton National Cemetery, starting as a cemetery caretaker and ultimately working up to a cemetery director. I served in the U.S. Air Force in the early 1990s. Enjoyed it, got to travel the world and see different things, and got out and then was fortunate enough to get on with VA. We have been around since 1867. First burial was actually September 11th, 1867. We are part of the VA, Department of Veterans Affairs. There are actually 3 branches of the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Veterans Health Administration, which we are co-located with here on the VA campus, the Veterans Benefits Administration, and then there is the National Cemetery Administration, which we fall under. So all VA, however, we operate a little differently and we each have different missions, but we're all here to serve the veterans and their families. We have 113 acres here at this National Cemetery, so as you can imagine, it takes a lot of upkeep. We also have over 62,000 veterans and family members buried here. So the maintenance from maintaining the turf, making sure it's well groomed, the grass is trimmed around each and every single headstone and marker, is a tremendous effort. On top of the normal obvious things that you might see coming into the cemetery, we also do a lot of headstone maintenance, which includes making sure the headstones are in perfect alignment with one another, making sure that they're clean. So cleaning, almost 60,000 headstones and making sure they're aligned so the veterans and their families, when they come to visit these sites, can be proud and glad that their loved one is in a place of honor. It takes a lot of work. We've got multiple planting beds. We have approximately 1,200 trees here. We have to make sure that those trees are well groomed, the planting beds look good, weed free. So it's a tremendous effort to make all that happen. Basic eligibility requirements to be buried in a VA National Cemetery is serving on active duty. In some cases, reservists can be buried here if they meet certain criteria, such as being retired, serving in certain campaigns, being classified as a disabled veteran. There are some time frames also associated with basic eligibility. Prior to September of 1980, if a veteran served 1 day and was discharged, without being dishonorably discharged, they would be eligible. After that date in September of 1980, they had to have served 2 consecutive years of active duty. The veteran's spouse would also be eligible to be buried at the National Cemetery. Their eligibility is based on the veteran's service. And in some cases, adult dependent children can also be buried with the veteran and the veteran's spouse. And then also minor children, should something happen to them, would also be eligible for burial in the National Cemetery as well. Memorial Day weekend, we kind of refer to here as our Super Bowl. It's extremely busy, a lot of prep time leading up to it. It kind of starts off the Friday before Memorial Day, where at 8 a.m. we have volunteers gather to place what we call the Avenue of Flags. And what that is there's a large American flag that's placed along the roadway throughout the entirety of the cemetery. Then once that is done, we run into Saturday morning, where the Boy Scout and Girl Scout program takes place. That starts at 9:30. There's a brief ceremony, and we have roughly 2,000 Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts that place individual American flags on every single grave site in the cemetery. So about 2,000 scouts, 60+ thousand graves. It takes them about 45 minutes to make that happen. It's pretty incredible. And always love getting the young folks out to the cemetery to see that happen. And then Monday at 11 a.m. we have our actual Memorial Day ceremony that runs about 45 minutes to an hour. And that's just where we commemorate and honor the veterans, that are buried here at the cemetery and across our nation. Memorial Day for me is a time to reflect and remember, my brothers and sisters as a veteran myself that paid the ultimate sacrifice. We've all heard the term that some gave all and all gave some. It's just a time to reflect on that and remember those that did give all. So it's a somber time, but it's also a day of remembrance.
We'll be right back with more of our Community Spotlight Memorial Day special on WRCX television.
Hi, I'm Deborah, and I am the branch manager for IH Credit Union in the Beaver Creek office. The thing I love most about my job is leading my amazing staff and meeting all of our new members in the Beaver Creek area. The best part of living in this community is all the fun and family-friendly things to do with my kids and grandkids. Your friends, your neighbors, your credit union. The IH Credit Union, step up to better banking.
Throughout the history of our great nation, there have been many battles fought by our brave men and women, but none more notorious than D-Day during World War II. Next, we'd like to share the story of a local man who was part of the invasion, paratrooping into occupied territory on D-Day 1944.
I'm Bart Reams. My father was Jack Reams, C Company, 1st Battalion, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division, World War II. Well, he was inducted in February 1943 and went through basic training and had a pass to go to town with a couple of buddies, and they had a little bit too much beer. On the way back into base, they saw a poster to jump into combat, join the paratroop. So they thought it was a grand idea to pound on the commanding officer's door at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell them they want to join the paratroopers. So he asked their names and told them to be in his office 0700 the next morning. As they woke up, they realized what they did and wanted to apologize to him, which they did. At 7 o'clock they were there, looked like model soldiers. So he patiently sat at his desk and let them apologize, and then asked if they were done. In unison they said, "Yes, sir." So he opened the lap drawer of his desk and pulled out their files. He said, "Good, because all you sons of gone." And that's how he joined the paratroop. And then he was with 508 through Normandy, jumped at 3:17 a.m. on June 6th. He jumped at Holland, what people know today as a bridge too far. And he got into some dust-ups there, and he was up for battlefield commission. And apparently the commanding officer didn't like the fact that he told a brigadier general to shove in order. So they denied his commission because of that. As things turned out, that was probably mid-November or so of 44 when that happened. And the bulge, things were starting to heat up a little bit with the Germans. And he had heard that his original unit, the 551st, was in the area. And they came in and said, anyone who volunteers and survives will drop all court-martials. Well, my dad said we were relatively warm, relatively well-fed, and relatively safe, so he said, no, not that nice. But he said no. So he said 20 minutes later, they kicked the door open of the brig, and they said all court-martials have been rescinded, and we want units. So he said 551st, because he was going back home to the guys that he trained with. They said, well, good, they're leaving on flatbed trucks. You get out now and grab your stuff. So that's how he hooked back up with the 551st. And at that point, they were positioned to be a spearhead unit for a counterattack. And they had, in December of 44, they were tasked with capturing some Germans that were in forward positions to get information. So it was at what's called a farm at Nofontaine. And it was a night operation through enemy-held woods They engaged the enemy, killed about 60, and captured around 20, and marched them back through woods that were still occupied. At that point, they had lost a few, and then the Bulge then really heated up. And then they were tasked with capturing the last intact bridge over the Somme River in Belgium. So that, as that transpired, they had contact with the Germans, in some cases hand-to-hand, and they had lost most of Company A. Company C attacked downhill with snow in green uniforms, and it was pretty tough. They wound up losing over 90% to capture that bridge, so, which they did, and they held it. And at the next day, January 8th, Hitler ordered the first withdrawal from the Bulge. It was a difficult task to get information out of him, and as I found over the years, the guys who were in combat, they just don't always talk about it freely. And I can remember even into his 80s, he would tell me that he would wake up at night shaking because he was on the back of a tank and there was a firefight going on. And so, as we would know today as PTSD, that they just suppressed that. At Normandy, he said that, if I recall right, it was probably a half hour or so before the first firefight. And totally, I asked him one time how many times he had been hit, and the only time I actually saw him stop and think, and you could see he was counting, he said 6 times, and all shrapnel. But he said if we knew they were on a point system in World War II, if you had a certain number of points, you could rotate home. A Purple Heart was worth 5 points. He said if we knew that, he said we would have turned everything in. But he said we didn't know they kept that from us, so it was one of those things that, you get shrapnel here and they field dress it. And he was in the hospital a couple of different times to heal. And so he was lucky in that respect that he didn't lose anything. They were in a firefight in Holland, and I guess it was fairly intense, and he was in a shell hole waiting for this thing to die down a little bit. And when it did, he said 2 of his buddies jumped in the shell hole and grabbed him. Are you okay? Are you okay? And he said, yeah, why? He said, we were over there watching. You were taking fire. He said, I don't think so. And then he took his backpack off, and there were bullet holes in it that had grenades stuffed in there also. And survived that. And I think that's one of those times where you become a fatalist and say, if it's your time, it's your time, and this one wasn't. But Memorial Day is one of those days where we honor the soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen that have sacrificed just putting on uniform. And to me, that's one of the great things about this nation. So, my daughter was friends with an exchange student from Holland, and when her time was up, her parents came to pick her up and take her back. And her little sister was with them, and they were asking Dad. People knew that he had been in the war, and he introduced him and told his daughter this is one of the heroes. And he said, no, the heroes never get home.
Hi, my name is Courtney from Springfield. I'm a loan specialist at the IH Credit Union on 1st Street. What I love most about my job is seeing my members every day, the interaction. What I love most about Springfield is we're a small town, we're all like family. Your friends, your neighbors, your credit union. The IH Credit Union, step up to better banking.
My name is Mark Landers, United States Army. I went on active duty in August of 1974. I stayed on active duty for 3.5 years. I thereafter went into the reserves. I commanded a number of units, the 705th Transportation Company, the 140th JAG Detachment. I was the staff judge advocate of the 914th Combat Support Hospital out of Columbus, and I ended up as the commander of the 9th Military Law Center out of Columbus. My story is I had a low draft number in 1971. I joined ROTC at Kent State. That was 3 months after the tragic shootings at Kent State University. And then I went in the military. I probably could have got out of the military, but I decided, you know, I had a moral commitment to the United States Army because they allowed me to stay in school for 2 years, which I fulfilled. And I ended up spending between active duty and the reserves 31 years. Well, I've been part of the Miami Valley since I went to law school here at University of Dayton. I've always been a very active person. I actually served on the Montgomery County Veteran Service Commission for 10 years as a commissioner. I served 2 years as an executive director. I'm a high school football coach at Northridge High School. I've coached high school football for the last 18 years. I've been part of a couple nonprofits. One's called Just a Pair of Shoes, whereby we give free Nike shoes to kids of need. I'm also part of another nonprofit called 100 Plus Men, where we've given over $500,000 to the greater Dayton area nonprofits over the past 6 or 7 years. I've always been a community person, and I continue to try to do that. Well, when you're on these sacred grounds, if you go back and you look in history, if we start with World War I, there's been over 640,000 men and women that have died in service of their country. And there's probably millions more that died thereafter as a result of their injuries that they incurred in combat or otherwise. So when I walk these hallowed grounds, I think of those individuals and what they did for their country. I think of their families before, now, and thereafter, the suffering they did because of the injuries sustained by those veterans. And that's why I'm committed as a veteran accredited attorney in front of the VA to ensure that every veteran gets every single benefit that they're entitled to. And that's been a commitment of mine for a long period of time, and that'll be a commitment of mine until I'm dead. When I come out here all the time, there's 60,000+ people that are buried. So it's an honor for me to come here and watch the ceremonies in honor of all those people. But even more importantly, it's not just the veterans, it's their families and what they've suffered for all these years. And after I come out here on Memorial Day, I'll go to the Vietnam Veterans, the ceremony they have, and I'll go to some local ceremonies where I live near the Centerville area, and I'll probably go down to the ceremony downtown Dayton. Memorial Day means to me, it's a time not just to be drinking beer, partying, etc. It means to me that we should be solemnly honoring the people that served this country, and that is why today we all still have our First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, you know, etc. So it's what they did, not what I did. It's what those people in this cemetery, these 60,000+, what they did and what their families suffered thereafter. And that's what I try to remember on Memorial Day. It's not just a holiday. It's a day for all of us to remember why we live in the greatest country, which is the United States of America.
Greetings, my name is Wayne Schatzel. I was drafted in the U.S. Army in 1966 of August. I did my basic at Fort Gordon, Georgia, AIT, Fort Leonard Wood. Ultimately, I wound up in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta with the 9th Division. Went into infantry, and we lost quite a few fellas. Sadly, I didn't remember their names, but I looked up in the records and found out that we had lost 39 men, young boys actually, and I had a boyhood friend. He died, or he was shot while I was over there, in November of '67. I left right after Tet, which is February of '68, which they say all hell broke loose, and it definitely did. I was actually late getting out because they kept mortaring the air base and planes couldn't get in. Ultimately, we did get in the air, and after 15 minutes of flight, they said one of the engines went out of the plane. So they said, well, we're going to have to head back to Vietnam. And another few minutes later, he said, the air base got mortared again, so now we're going to the Philippine Islands with one engine out. So anyway, we finally made it. Must have got a different plane, and then went on, landed in California. And what I didn't realize when I was over there, the anti-war movement, and of course they had protesters, I completely took me by shock. I never realized it would be like that. It's important to say that because for all these years, it was not popular to be a veteran of Vietnam in particular. So we kind of kept everything under our hat till 9/11, when the sentiment turned towards thank you for your service. Coming back from Vietnam, I had 6 months left, which was normal for a draftee. They did 6 months before service, Vietnam, and then 1 year Vietnam, and then 6 months left. I volunteered for funeral duty, so we would do funerals, military funerals for the boys coming back in bags, if you will. And it was a surreal thing. We would come in on these buses, like in Memphis, with a wire over the windows because there's riots going on. And it's like nobody cared, and we would go out to these grave sites, and it was the young boy in the casket, and he might have kids, a wife, and it's like nobody cared except that family. They were Gold Star families, and did not have get the honor they should have received. So looking back on that, I was got to fold the flag at pallbearers every now and then. That's probably the most, I don't know, honorable thing I've done in the service. And so I look back on that, and actually my daughter, when she come back from Iraq, we went to, actually I did the honor flight and went to Washington, D.C. I got to see the wall for the first time, and I had my list of my 40 names, and I told the people that run it there that I was going to try to find them, and they was so gracious about it. They would do a rubbing on that wall for all those 40 names, and I said, well, that's not necessary, but it was just moving, seeing those names and actually just touching them on the wall. Memorial Day means to me, as I think back on the loss we had of the young lives that was taken up, and I think more about the families that did not get the honor that they should have got. But tide has turned, and it's a little bit different now. It's a good climate for veterans. I walk in among these rows, and that's what I think about as I'm looking at them. The guys that did, they're like planet, and they're waiting for the resurrection.
My name is Gil Esparza. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, served from 1978 to 1993. I served on 5 at-sea commands, and it was a privilege serving for my military. Memorial Day is a tough time for many veterans like myself that have lost a lot of loved ones that served with us throughout the campaigns that we served. So My career started in 1978 and ended in 93. I was medically retired after receiving injuries during the Gulf War. And this is a time for me that I reflect a lot on the men and women that I served with that I've lost. And may not show it, but on the inside, we're just beat up during this time. And we're crying inside, but we're not doing it outside. So Memorial Day is a very, very important day for me. And I seek ways to be able to honor my brothers and sisters that paid the ultimate sacrifice. Retired veteran service officer. I've spent my life filing claims for thousands of veterans along the way to help them get their service connection, not for themselves, but for their families and their children. So I take it very seriously. I love what I do, and my life now is spent running a nonprofit that pays tribute to combat veterans and first responders by providing bicycles for them at no cost to them. And we honor them during this time on Memorial Day with the honor ride that I'll be at in New Albany, Ohio on Memorial Day weekend. I'll be riding with a cycling team. We're doing a 100-mile century ride to honor our brothers and sisters that we lost, and I'll be riding with Project Hero. I'm sorry about that. It's just pretty moving for us, because when you get hundreds and maybe thousands of cyclists that are men and women that have served honorably to pay respects to our brothers and sisters that we lost during this time, it's just a pretty somber event. And it's my way of giving back and not forgetting their sacrifices. So that's how I'm going to be spending my Memorial Day weekend. During this time of the year, many people don't realize what Memorial Day really is. And I think they're doing it out of honor and respect to the veteran. And I respect it when they say that. But it's also a teaching moment for me to sit with them and maybe one-on-one, really let them know what Memorial Day really is about, and maybe mention some of the brothers and sisters that I lost during my time in service, and just let them know that it's okay to not be okay, and a lot of us are going to be that way during that time, but I think it is a teachable moment. So I respect anybody that says that to me, but I also take it as an opportunity to make it a teachable moment.
Thanks for tuning in for our Memorial Day Community Spotlight Special, brought to you by the IH Credit Union. Happy Memorial Day, Miami Valley.